this is something we talk about day in and day out, right? When is it brand and when is it content? But we all agree, and that's also based on the cool facts, is that it is the content. It will always be the content that drives the intent.
Welcome to Mobile Growth and Pancakes, a podcast by StoreMaven. We break down how and why mobile apps grow. In each episode, we invite a mobile growth expert onto the show to break down a specific mobile growth strategy, how it worked, why it worked, and what they would do differently. I'm your host, Esther Shatz. Welcome to Mobile Growth and Pancakes. I am joined today by Jeff Aksengor, who is Director of Growth at Podimo. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Jeff, and I've been with Podimo since September last year. That is pretty much a lot of time, or at least a big share of the company lifetime, because we started back in 2019. And yeah, since then we've experienced great growth, and a lot of things has happened, especially because a lot of that lifetime, you can say, has been done through the COVID-19 period, which is, as you know, quite unstable and turbulent, etc. So yeah. But in a nutshell, what I'm in charge of is the global growth strategy and operation, of course. So I'm both a technical toolkit, you can say, but also support a lot of the local market development and strategic directions there.
Amazing. Before we go too deep into that, I do have to ask how one goes from competitive breakdancer to mobile growth expert.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question. I've always been a fan of the commercial side of the world. So even though that I was basically competing in breakdancing, I was always a part of events and building up marketing activities and trying to kind of promote whatever workshops there might be. So I think it has always been kind of my parallel passion, you can say, to just focus on the marketing and growth side of everything. So it hasn't been a huge leap or jump for me. It was basically just shifting more time into what I do. But thank you for asking, and thank you for spotting it in my LinkedIn bio.
I think you might be the first person we've had on the podcast who can add breakdancing to their CV. So it's had to bring it up. It's very cool.
However, a fun fact: it's becoming mainstream now. Breakdancing just got accepted as an official sport in the Olympics.
Wow,
True.
I did not know that.
Oh yes,
that'll be one of the few Olympic sports we might actually watch in this household.
Exactly. It's like a retention driver, or at least unlocking new audiences, maybe. So good strategy for them.
Yeah, growth for the Olympics. Very good. Reaching new right. Generational audiences. All right, so let's go straight into it. I think generally here we tend to focus on more traditional growth strategies like UA and organics, and I would love to cover. First of all, Podimo, it's a content app, right? It's about being able to surface relevant channels, relevant audio material for users who come in. How does this, how would you say that you look at growth from the content perspective rather than, this is my UA strategy and this is my organic strategy and call it a day?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. And maybe I can throw a few words about the product itself, right? So, as mentioned before, we kicked off at the end of 2019. So we're pretty much a very new company still, a young company. And so currently we're live in Denmark, which is our number one market, you can say. And I'm not saying that it's strategically number one. We're equally focused on all our markets, but it's where it all began. This is all. This is where it all started, and now we're live in Germany, Spain, and in Latin America. So our goal is to offer best in class short format audio to the end users, right? And basically we're focusing on content that can't be found anywhere else. We basically focused on offering a hyperlocal content catalog. Depending on the market needs, and we've recently added a massive audiobook catalog to to the product, as we believe that there's a strong correlation between those formats, and also we believe that there's lots of added value towards the end user by having that as well.
Can I ask you quickly just about when you mentioned that hyper localized content is something you're focused on?
Mhm.
How much do you need, when your focus is hyper local, how much do you need a very local team to be able to support those efforts versus how much can you kind of scale without going region by region?
No, that's a great question, and it needs to be a balance, because there will be content formats that are, um, let's call it, more prone to localization. So it can be global shows, basically English centric usually, and then the stories would be a great fit for whatever market you localize them for. So you would basically translate them, localize them, and publish them there. And that's, of course, a more cost efficient strategy. However, there will be formats that are not prone to that, and a lot of them aren't. So there is a lot of curation going on locally. So we are always dependent on having a local curation team and a curation content strategy as well in place. And that is how we differentiate, right? Because this is basically saying, look, we deliver the feel of the local market and the vibe of the local market, or culture, or whatever talk of town there is, through those verticals that we focus on currently, those genres. And that goes from true crime, entertainment, self-development, etc. Basically the conventional genres. And there will be a fiction, but lots of that is non most of it is nonfiction right now.
Cool. And I would imagine that you had probably a plan set in place for 2020 that was probably disrupted, I'm guessing, around March time.
Absolutely. I think it's like everyone in the audio or video consumption industry, just everything that has to do with habits and daily routines has been pretty much turned upside down. And in our case, given the fact that podcast is a format that usually is consumed during commute, and we really expected our listening activity to drop, because we thought, well, this is not going to happen, so it wouldn't kind of serve the same purpose, because there is no commute. People are basically staying at home, working from home, and there's no need to kind of consume that type of audio formats. So that was basically an assumption that we had, and I can get back to how that went. But we also expected that the potential economical instability may cause the need to trim the amount of subscription services out there, right? We're not a kind of a premium cost platform, I would say, comparing to our competitors in the markets we are. However, everything counts, right? So I think that the average person, at least in the Nordics right now, has 6+ subscriptions for audio and video. And I think times like that just kind of, I guess, makes you reflect a bit about how much should you actually have, and maybe make it a healthy choice, right? Because then you just end up sitting in your couch and binging whatever flicks there are, right? But what we saw quite clearly is that a new routine popped up, and the me time has become more. What we can see is just the me time, as you know, the entity or the concept of me time has become more important, and to drift away to amazing stories and nurture that me time has become a thing, and that's something we're really seeing in our consumption patterns.
So how do you pick up on that? You have this obviously an event that nobody planned for that's severely disrupted, which is true. Podcasts and commute was, it was natural to think of the two together. How do you start to detect this change? How do you figure out, okay, there is, we know commute is gone. Fine. This is something we all figured out pretty quickly, but how do you figure out that there is this actual consumption shift that's relevant for you to capitalize on?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And I think that happened incrementally, right? It didn't happen overnight because, I mean, given the fact that we are at least in you can say 8 very different markets. I mean, Latin America is somewhat different there, but I mean, let's say 8 quite different markets, and some of them had restrictions, some of them didn't. Some of them chose to do the lockdowns at a certain point, some didn't. So what we did is basically monitor the consumption by market, right? And specifically in those markets where we have the biggest data sets and could drag some sort of significant learnings out of that, right? So what we saw is that if you look at an MAU, just an MAU-based kind of view on it, obviously we saw some changed patterns, but that kind of gained traction again. So we didn't see any huge drop-offs there. But what we saw is a shifted time of the day where users would consume, launch the app,
interesting,
and have their sessions. And also, I would say there's a slight shift in the type of content that's consumed. I wouldn't say it's drastical, and I wouldn't go as far as saying it's significant, but we're seeing it's more skewed towards what you would probably spend time listening or viewing in the evenings, right? Which is more like true crime formats, or like really something that can make you drift away. Whereas this is an assumption that we have currently, and we still need to validate it, that is when you're basically commuting, or you know, on your way to work or a job interview or whatever, you need something that can kind of trigger some sort of, you know, inspiration, motivation, and maybe that's a bit more in the self-development entertainment genres. Whereas what we see, well, I mean, true crime is also entertainment, but what I'm saying is maybe kind of the comedy type of entertainment, whereas the evening and me time consumption is really about drifting away and getting depth of an enticing and super interesting story, etc.
Right, you don't want to get lost in something else when you're on your way to an important meeting. So that's awesome. So you identify these changes. You see that there is this different pattern in consumption. How do you react to that? How does your growth plan change? What do you know? How do you create the shift to match that?
Right. So what we do is, I mean, the content pieces that we're seeing perform well, those are the ones we use to, on one hand, to curate more localized content like that for the future shows and new shows that are coming up. And also we look at retention, right? I mean, what we're seeing is if there's a super popular show that doesn't really connect or has a spillover to what we offer on the platform, you would see a lot of people come in for that, and you would see them leave again, right? And that really makes sense, right? It from the everyday context where you basically, you're entering a sneaker shop, and all of a sudden in the corner there's a barista making coffee, and you're like, wow, that's strange, but there might be some who smelled the coffee and went in just for that and never cared about the sneakers. Weird analogy, but you get the point. So that is a thing, and of course I think many similar platforms and products experience that, right? You would really need to think about how do you retain those who come in for a certain show, but also discover the amazing lookalike shows or similar content, or maybe even expand the horizons by just discovering new categories that's happened to the interests of the user, right? So of course the onboarding has something to say, but also the CRM, the way that the product recommends new shows and content pieces has a lot of this, has a huge role to play in that, right? Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does, yeah. I mean, it brings another question, which is basically, if we look at, I think, especially in what we see in this post-COVID world, is that if you hadn't let content sort of drive a lot of what you were looking towards and a lot of what you were understanding, you'd probably have missed a very high potential, right? You'd be catering towards something that wasn't really happening. But my question is, you have this one driver, which is content, and kind of getting that sense of, okay, what's fueling here? What am I serving? And then you also have the brand side, right? You're trying to craft a specific, we can have debates on the importance of brand, but I think everybody has some sense of understanding that brand is is a central component. How do you balance these two? Can you work them together? Do you let content lead the way and say, forget the brand, we're not we'll figure that out after? Do you try to make, do you limit your content within the brand? How do you balance these two concepts, which can often compete?
Right. That's a great question, and to be transparent, this is something we talk about day in and day out, right? When is it brand and when is it content? But we all agree, and that's also based on the kind of the cool facts, is that it's always the content that drives awareness, right? Because I mean, in a nutshell, we're just a platform, but we offer amazing content, right? So it is the content. It will always be the content that drives the intent, right? Because that's what we sell. That's what the platform is all about. And we are also very focused on selling, not selling, but producing and selling very, very high quality content. So exclusive content that is clearly well produced and there's put lots of thoughts and curation and investment behind it. And that's what drives the business forward, because we believe that, and this is really, again, a differentiation factor where we say, look, we completely appreciate and acknowledge that there's a free trend in the vertical within which we operate. However, we also need to emphasize that amazing content costs, and you need to invest in that, right? And we're seeing that more and more users, and that's just maybe a consumption trend, is realizing that. There's a reason why a platform like Podimo is charging a fee, because that doesn't only cover, obviously, the production cost, but it also supports the creators. We have a model where we support the creators, and basically directly from the premium revenue that you as a user are paying, based on your consumption patterns, a cut of that is directly given to the creator.
Amazing. I think, one of the questions probably that happens here is, when content is the driver, right? And the ability to have really quality content and to focus your energies on that. How do you create a growth strategy around that? I mean, you can sit and say, let's just find the best content, but obviously if everyone could do it, then we'd be in a different ballgame. How do you turn that into a growth strategy? How do you create that process and set goals around it?
Right. So, I mean, test and learn, it is the way forward, especially in the business we're in. We could go for a plethora of verticals and types of content, types of creators. We call them partners. So I think that the curation strategy is really all about how do we test and learn and monetize, of course, but also how do we do the selection as bulletproof as possible. And that's basically based on the trends in the culture, the commercial potential, the cost of production, etc. So I think there's lots of thought that's put into how do we select and kind of reduce the next steps, or the next, let's call it, the roster of potential content productions, into what we believe will be the best fit for our consumers, but also for the market that we're in, because this is not just this is equally important for nurturing the existing, but it's also a huge part of building out PR, do those kind of, I wouldn't call it news jag, but kind of ride the wave of already existing pressing topics in the society, right? Whether that's being true crime cases, or being a politically something, political obstacles or topics that are trending, etc. And I guess, but how this differentiates from I guess a newspaper is that this is the depth, right? This is where you get the depth, and you get really the option to drift away and feel that you are inside that story that you're consuming, which is, I would say, quite an important entity when we curate.
So I'd love to understand how you look at audience and audience growth, because clearly the people that will be consuming are the key indicators of what content belongs, right? You're reading the kind of true crime has this popularity, and I know we touched on local markets earlier, but I mean, even within a specific local market, of course, there's age ranges and demographic considerations. How much do you play around with, okay, we've decided this is the audience we're going after, which means we need to figure out this branch of content, and how much are you kind of seeing who's coming in and saying, hey, maybe there's this group we didn't consider, let's see how we optimize and iterate for them?
Yeah, great question. I think the easiest and most concise answer to that, I mean, there's a lot of complexity around this topic and internal considerations, but I mean, it boils it down to the personas, right? I mean, and the personas might not be age bracket dependent, but what they usually have in common is certain lifestyle aspects or common denominators, you can say, right? And those are the levers that we're going for. I will not be able to tell you about our personas. That's pretty sensitive for our business. But what I can say is that's really something we work with when unlocking. Let me put it this way: when unlocking a new market and do kind of build the go-to market strategies locally. This is what it's all about for us. Because the easier we can lock in on those personas, the easier makes it for us to curate content, but also to drive the growth outside of the app towards the product.
And how much do you need, how much do you need to tap into a specific persona? Do you need somebody on your team who fits that demographic? Do you need focus groups? How much can you actually, how much does research get you, and how much do you need tangible somebody there to tie this in for you?
Well, it's usually a combo, right? I mean, a part of content curation strategy is to look beyond the content itself. It's also to look at what is the target audience for this? What is I mean, in the old school terms, the readership, and what is in this case it's listenership, of course, but what is the brand of the partner or creator we're doing it with, and is it aligned with what we think would drive this forward and get the momentum that we expect. But I think it's a combination of a lot of internal discussions, also learnings from all our markets. And this is the beauty of being in a global team where you basically are in the tower and kind of, fetching all the learnings and try to basically, mix the formula that you can, push back and amplify the go-to-market strategy. So the short answer is it's always a mix, right? Lots of user survey and user research, qualitative and quantitative as well, consumption behavior, conversations with our partners, and basically the curation team is a big driving force there as well.
Have you ever gotten it just completely wrong? Have you ever had something that you were so sure was the right pathway and just bombed completely when you tried to launch it live?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a part of the learning curve that we're in. I think if we have this conversation 5 years down the line, we would have. I would assume and expect that we would have less of those, because the data set becomes bigger and your learning is more in check and stable, and you have more or less a formula of everything you do. But I mean, in this stage we're at, and also during those very shifting times, absolutely, that there's been bets that have not met what we expected, and needed a shifted strategy, and that's we'll live and we'll learn.
Do you find that you're able to take those, is it random? We thought this would work and it didn't. Is there something in the process that you detect as, we didn't take this into consideration, we need this in future processes? How do you go through that pathway of minimizing, 5 years down the line where you don't feel like you're having as many of them? How does that look?
Right. Well, this is a big part of my work, daily work, and that is to cap those learnings, but also, analyze them and really look at it from a scale perspective. How much of that is actually scalable, right? Let's use you said it yourself. You said true crime. It's a growing category. It's super popular also in the streaming video streaming services that we're seeing, and there's lots of content out there that it's about that. We do know that in some of our markets, this is an amazing growth driver, and in some of our markets, it's just not. And this is a cultural thing that, in some markets, there might already be so much true crime in the news and media that it's not really a thing you want to subscribe for.
It's not the escape when it's your day to day.
It's not the escape. It's actually the opposite, right? You just get the same as you consume in your day to day, information flow, right? So it's just an example, but basically, locking in on those learnings and really kind of take a stand in how do we scale this, and if not, what is the role of this learning for those existing markets? Are we gonna change it? Are we gonna keep it as is? Are we gonna use it to maybe create a new category that we believe could then be the kind of the best fit for the market that we're entering, etc. And that's an interesting and ongoing process, because as you get better at getting the learnings, you also get better at analyzing them and reduce them to few specific actions that are becoming this playbook when we roll out whatever activities.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I think one of the big challenges, definitely in the world of content consumption, but we see it places like, fitness apps or plenty of other places where you have content that on the one hand can be free and is free in many situations. And on the other, you mentioned it before, premium content is something that you understand. Okay, I opt in for this. There's a reason that people choose to subscribe to 5 or 6 different streaming services instead of, streaming online wherever they can find it. I'd be interested to hear how you kind of balance this idea of, on the one hand, we need to prove that our content is valuable, right? We need somebody to already have that buy-in that this is worth the cost. On the other hand, there's a limit to how much we want to give for free when, maybe we're supporting a specific type of engagement that won't profit us in the long term. How do you guys look at that? How do you create the balance between making sure you're growing your user base profitably versus just getting eyes on you that don't actually stick around or don't convert into something monetary long term?
Right. This is a great question, and I think it's a question that also has a different answer comparing to, or at least depending on which market you're talking about. I mean, truth is, from a competitive standpoint, we do know how our competition is, and of course, we are in a very competitive landscape. So competitor analysis and differentiation is just the talk of the town internally, right? This is how it is for us. This is our day-to-day conversation. So what we do is, we need to look at what is the consumption trends, what is maybe the maturity of what we offer in a certain market. Let me give you Spain. For example, what we do is not a well-established format in Spain yet. It hasn't been subscription services and podcasts that you need to pay for. It's not something that is widely acknowledged in a market like Spain, for instance. Whereas it's completely different in Denmark and Germany, for instance, right? And we're seeing the same patterns when we basically do competitive analysis. So even that question needs to be answered based on what market are we talking about. So in some markets, less is more, absolutely. We know that we'd rather have better retention than massive volumes and then lots of churn. But what we do know for sure is that content quality is unbeatable, right? If it's the friction in a free premium model that we're gonna go with or not, it's the content that'll drive retention, because that's at the end of the day what the product is all about, right? And it's maintaining that quality level is the common denominator for us.
So do you have different onboarding flows and different models per market? When you're launching in Spain, is it a completely different model of how you launch in, say, Germany, or how you launched in Denmark?
We're getting there. We're getting there. I would say it's something it also is a question of market maturity, right? I mean, we are still a new company. Again, if we're going to have a conversation 5 years down the line, there's going to be much more clarity in my answers. But I think we're still in the phase of locking in on how do we approach market X, Y, Z, and also, what is the perfect onboarding strategy for Spain? What is the perfect onboarding strategy for Denmark and Germany? But yes, given the fact that we have a local team in all of the markets, that's what we believe is needed to have a hyper-local approach. Then yes, the onboarding will be aligned with that, and it will be slightly different from market to market.
And how do you set about, how long do you kind of give as testing periods when you're in the stage that you're in of really learning and figuring out? And it sounds like you guys have been pretty agile. It's one of the benefits of early day companies as well, is being able to actually say, okay, let's respond to what we're seeing and not just the plan that we decided for ourselves a few months ago. How long can you get, let's say we're talking about onboarding in Spain, where you're in this market where you're kind of creating something that's more new to market that doesn't relate to user behaviors. How long do you feel that you give an experiment to run before you say we have to scrap this, or this is our way, let's close the chapter on this, move on to the next task, and keep an eye on how things are going?
Well, this is a more scientific type of answer or question, and I mean, it really depends what type of experiment you're doing. If you're in more in the qualitative space, let me put it that way, then obviously you don't need a massive group of people before you can start seeing some common denominators and patterns, etc. And on the other hand, if you're doing some sort of ATL activity, it's also very difficult to measure it, right? Because that's just the nature of the format. So a lot of that is a lot of the thought and the planning is going into how do we utilize formats where we can get instant reach and lots of that, so that we can learn from it fast. So it's really all about really handpicking the methods and the channels and pleasure. And thanks for having me. Variants, you can say, that would give you fast and as significant as possible, at least, learnings. So it's really a mix, I would say, of methods we're using there.
And let's shift away from growth for a minute. I'm just curious. We obviously went through a massive global change over the past year or so, and I think content consumption is one of the things that is being looked at in a completely different way. I mean, if we look at how people have many regions subscribe to different streaming services, audio services, what the expectation is of back to normal life, and do we go back? Do you think that there was a permanent shift in the market? Do you think that we're, me time, for example, is that something that this is the new normal and this is something we take, or do you see us going slowly back to the old ways of we're back on the commute, this is what we're looking for, everything is as it was?
Well, I think this is a personal opinion. I think it's extremely difficult to break a habit. It's probably, again, from a marketeer's perspective, breaking a habit is much more difficult than riding the wave of an already existing one, right? So I would say I'm not afraid of that. The commuting is gone for good now that people haven't been doing that for a year's time. I think everything will get back to normal as soon as the conditions are right, because that's how it's been done for decades, right? So I think what we will learn from here, and that's basically something that we need to focus on, and that is we have unlocked a potential new habit that we need to focus on, and that is what's the most interesting there. So I think this is really a question of what have we learned during those I don't know, year and a half for now, I think, and how are we gonna induce that in our day-to-day strategy.
Like it. So nothing goes away, you add. Basically, you assume that the previous habits are there. Now we have this additional layer to add in, and I guess kind of continue to build off. I don't want to know what the next year has in store for us in terms of dramatic routine altering whatever, but just continuously kind of layer each new behavior on top of the next.
Exactly. So we take it as an amazing and quite unique opportunity. Although it's been turbulent and tough for mostly all of us, I'd say, right? But we also take it as an opportunity to learn and to potentially spot new areas where we can build retention and intent.
Are you ready for the quick fire round?
Absolutely.
All right. It's not too scary, I promise. If you could give just one tip to an aspiring growth marketer, what would it be?
Test, learn, don't be afraid to fail.
Favorite growth resource?
Oh, my user base.
Nice. Okay. Who is the person, speaking about going back to normal life, the person in the mobile growth world that you'd most want to take for lunch, and why?
That's a good one. I think it's going to be someone who has been in the business for a long time. So obviously it would be Mark Zuckerberg.
So, I'm always surprised that more people don't answer Mark Zuckerberg, because it's like, yeah, he's I would also want to go to lunch with Mark Zuckerberg and see what
that would be so
what is in there. Yeah. Okay. The most important question when you're at lunch with Mark Zuckerberg, let's say you're at a pancake house. What is your favorite type of pancake?
It would be for sure with vanilla ice cream. So yeah.
Any pancake with vanilla ice cream.
Any pancake with vanilla ice cream. It's the best.
So really you like ice cream more than you like pancakes is what I'm getting from this.
Well, no, I think it's a combination. I love pancakes.
I'm with you. Every time I finish this round, I'm like instantly need to find a way to get myself a pancake with. Now I want it with ice cream. So yeah, that's
you gotta try it if you haven't. It's an amazing.
I'm American. We've had pancakes every way, If we can put ice cream on it, we put ice cream on it. If we can put dough in it, we put dough in it. That's how we roll. I will tell you, I once had a pancake that was made into an ice cream cone with the ice cream in the middle, which was messy, but it was a treat, and I highly recommend.
It must be super messy, but you need to just hurry up and eat it.
Worth it. They make sinks, that's what soap is for. Exactly. Okay, amazing, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing. And where can people find you? If do you have? I know you're in a studio now, so how much can people follow you? Where can they hear more?
I think for sure, check out the platform. That's the best place to start to know a bit more about what I'm doing indirectly. Follow me on LinkedIn. That's where the business magic happens. There's not much more breakdancing going on. Otherwise, I was going to say, is there a channel somewhere? I could have pumped in a breakdancing promotion for myself, but no, not a lot of that is going on. Now I'm getting a bit older and have less time. But for sure, check out the LinkedIn, of course, LinkedIn profile. Check out Podimo's Instagram and Facebook accounts, and check out the platform. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Pleasure. And thanks for having me.
And that was Mobile Growth and Pancakes. To find out more about StoreMaven and how we can improve App Store performance, visit storemaven.com. And then make sure to search for Mobile Growth and Pancakes in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at StoreMaven, thanks for listening.